afternoon, good day if you can tell. Well, I guess recently I haven't been having my purple shades, y'all, but right now we're doing this in the morning. We're going to be talking all sorts of cool stuff, as you can see from the title, who we're talking to. But just real quick, just thank you, everybody, again for coming out for the charity stream last Friday. I think in 7 raised over $1,000 for St. Jude's Children's Hospital and Research. Amazing event all the way around. But with that said, y'all know the show isn't about anything other than the person in the title. And so without further ado, I want to bring him out. None other than Doragon. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. And just to bounce off that whole charity point, what an amazing event that was. Everybody banding together. Over $1,000 raised, stupendous, absolutely superb. Yeah. Like, I'm so proud of everybody who got involved, whether in chat or on stream.
Yeah, it was
everyone.
A community effort. If you're in chat, if you donated, if you're streaming, if you just, I mean, it all of it comes together. So I totally hear you on that, Doragon, for sure. But welcome to, I feel really privileged right now because, if y'all did not know, we're streaming this on Monday before the show airs. And Doragon could not get Rudix, or Rudix could not get Doragon on the show this morning because it wasn't working.
Not like it's our show or anything, and we do it every week, but it just didn't work for me today. So yeah, sorry, Ru.
It's working for me today, and we're doing it on Restream. So like, there's no... I don't know. Like,
I blame Rudix. Totally his fault. Yeah, 100% Rudix's fault.
It's always Rudix. No, Rudix is amazing. Obviously, he definitely has probably the best curly hair in the community, as you always point this out. I have wavy. He actually has curly, so he definitely.
I saw the podcast he does with Nads the other day, and honestly, he came out and I was like, when did they get Dee Snider to do this? Like, he came out full Twisted Sister. I was like, yes, rock it. Go for it, dude.
Amazing. He does amazing. I mean, there's a couple of others who we'll have to get on the show, but Rudix, I think, takes the cake as the #1 curly hair there. We'll have to see. I don't know. There's a couple of
no one I know, but I think it's a good competition to have who has the curliest hair. Get everybody in the same room.
Obi Rose has some pretty good. Obi has some really good hair too. So.
Especially once he's taken his cornrows out as well.
I know. Like, that's why I'm like kind of like going there with that one. But we'll have to do that. We'll have to do it another show on
the curly hair show.
Sure. So Doragon, what's going on?
I don't know. I died last week a little bit. So if you haven't gathered from the t-shirt I'm wearing, I went to a concert. And I had a whale of a time. It was wonderful, but I kind of contracted a bit of a stomach bug, and then I promptly died afterwards. And this is my first day properly back on my feet and feeling human again. So yeah, I don't know what's been going on. What's been happening in the world? Who's who? What's up? What's down? I'm very confused at this moment in time.
well, as we said, we're doing this Monday, and I'm not sure if it'll come up, but if we do talk anything Activision Blizzard, it is before the deal has been announced. So please forgive us as we don't know what's going on. But I'm not sure if it'll come up. But Doragon, we always start everything off with, like, who are you? Like, your gamer tag or your YouTube name, Doragon. Where does it come from?
A long and storied history, thousands of years in the making. Around about 2014, it came into existence for me. I was doing a lot of cosplay at the time, and I was entering competitions, and I was building a fan base, and I ended up getting stalked by a couple of people, which is not something I would wish upon anybody. It's absolutely terrifying. Thankfully, I lived alone, and I had plenty of security on the building I lived in, so they couldn't actually get to me. The police handled it quite well too. But I realized at that point I needed to separate who I was as an individual and this persona I was putting out there through my cosplay escapades. A lot of the characters that I was dressing up as, that I was embodying when I was at these events, on these stage competitions and such, were based around dragons. So like Natsu Dragneel from Fairy Tail is a dragon slayer. a couple of dragoon armored warlocks and mages and such. That there was a lot of dragon-esque stuff within my sort of repertoire. So I was looking around for like variations of it, and I didn't want to go with like the very standard ones we see all the time in fiction and stuff like Draco and what have you from, say, Dragonheart. I wanted something a bit more unique to people over at least this end of the world. So I started looking at Japanese culture, where a lot of these characters came from. And it turns out they actually have a very specific word for Western dragons, because there's two types in mythology. You've got the Western ones, which have got your 4 legs and wings. And then you've got your Eastern ones, which are the snakes with wings, essentially. Sometimes not even the wings, they just fly on magic. And the word for the Western dragon, which, I mean, I don't look Eastern in any way, shape or form, I'm definitely Western, is Doragon. So considering nobody over here really knew what that meant, I adopted that as my name. And as I've evolved from the cosplay side of things into the more hardcore gaming and content creation, that name has just followed me along and been this persona that I've been able to put out in the world and protect the guy behind it, sort of thing.
That's so many things. I think one thing that really resonated with me right there is you put a O in front behind that D and it just throws off everybody. They're like, "What is this?" like, what is this word? It looks like dragon, but it has an O. We don't know what it is.
Put on a Japanese accent, try and say dragon, you're pretty much there. It's slightly offensive, but you're pretty much there.
Oh my gosh. No, so cosplay. So I think we'll get to this in a second, because that is definitely do you have an Instagram or anything like that that we can follow with your cosplay, or a site or anything? Or is it you're separating your two personas? Is that part of it?
I do have an Instagram. It was very active up until about 2019, and then I sort of forgot it existed. Plus, the world ended. I don't know if you were aware of that one. A couple of people had to stay inside.
Koalas were dying at the end of 2019. If you go back to news articles, there was a huge Australian fire with koalas dying.
Yeah, I've got a T-shirt supporting that as well, like money donations to help fight the wildfires out there. I got family out there at the time.
Really?
They've sadly passed. They were old. They were very old. Like, they'd lived a damn good life, but yeah, they were saying at the time that they may have to evacuate. And it was intense. The Aussie fires, 2019, 2020. It was
huge. That was like the new. If you go back to like right before the pandemic, there was like it was about the Australian fires and like millions of acres being burned, and they had these like pictures of these burned koalas, and then all of a sudden you started hearing about like a virus. It's like, oh, whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like
and the world went silent. Indeed.
Silent, yes. So, well, if you want, we can put your thing there so people can get an idea. But we'll talk about that in a second. You know, your cosplay, because you have a whole.
I have a history. Yeah.
You have a history. So, all right. So your Doragon understands it's about your kind of protecting that essence, like really separating the person from the persona, if you will.
Yeah.
But this is a gaming channel. It's not a cosplay channel, even though I have gotten people said I need to start interviewing cosplay people because there's an overlap there that I'm missing.
There's a big overlap. Yeah.
So I may ask you to like hook me up with some cosplay, because I have gotten that request before. We always want to know, what was your first gaming memory?
My first gaming memory, I don't know if anybody else has something like it. It was an old handheld, looked like a Game Boy, but wasn't. It was just LED lights in a screen. And it was a game that my father had when he lived out in Australia. He was one of the £10 pomps. So they moved out there in, I want to say 1965, something along those lines. And
he was one of the what?
They called them £10 poms. So people from Britain emigrated to Australia en masse just after the war because they didn't have enough people to make the country work. So they said to Britain, where we got quite a lot of people still and not a lot of landmass, do you want to come out where it's a bit warmer and nicer? And so loads of people went. My grandparents were a family that chose to go. My aunts and my father were, well, my dad and my aunt were children at the time. My other aunt was actually born out there, so she is full-bore Australian. And he had this handheld gaming console from around the late 70s, and it was just a racing game. Your car was one light, and then there were other lights that just sort of tumbled down the screen, and it got faster and faster, and you had to dodge the cars that you were racing, overtaking all the way, and it just kept a high score on the side. And my dad's high score was still on there. I found it in the coat hanging closet at my grandparents' house, put some batteries in it, and I played that for hours. I think it took about 6 months before I finally beat my dad's record that had been on there since like the early 80s or something. So by the mid 90s, I defeated his gaming record. But that is definitely my earliest memory of it. Of course, growing up in the 90s, things like the Sega Mega Drive, the Nintendo 64, the Sony PlayStation 1, they were the core home consoles. Everybody went round to each other's houses to play on them. And I remember so many different times, New Year's, playing Golden Axe on the Game Boy around one friend's house, or slogging through Final Fantasy VII with 6 of us and losing disc 2 at one point. Don't ask. I don't know how we lost disc 2. It wasn't even my game. It had been brought round.
Someone took it. That's
someone took it. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it turned out the dog was lying on top of it, but yeah, there you go.
Oh my god!
It was all about gaming together back then, and they are such joyful memories. It's why I like going back to the retro consoles. It's why I still have all of my retro consoles. Why I look at emulation routes as well to keep these things alive on more easily accessible devices and such. It's just fond memories more than anything else, and it was a pinnacle era where things were changing drastically year upon year.
No, I definitely you mentioned something which a lot of people don't realize is that gaming actually originated for adults, right? It was adult entertainment. And so I think that's kind of cool that you had like your dad's gaming handheld, like, and then you had it. I mean, imagine you weren't an adult in the mid 90s, but still kind of that.
No, very, very small person in the mid 90s. Yeah.
That transition, I think, is like pretty cool. And do you still have this handheld?
It unfortunately bit the bullet not too long after I beat Dad's high score, and then the aunt's dog found it and thought it was a chew toy.
And that doesn't. Well, it's like it did. I have this like it lasted just long enough for you for you to become a gamer, for you to it did its job in this world.
It did everything it needed to do, and I will never forget that connection. I've never had a bad connection with my dad. Everything we've ever done together has been pretty much wonderful. Even arguments and like disagreements and political things and what have you. But it's always been wonderful. But that one, I think that's one that will stay with me until the very end.
So in a way, it's like your dad brought you into gaming.
Yeah, he's got a lot to answer for.
No, I think it's cool because like we talk to a lot of people and we see like a lot of times it is that family for me, even there is this family connection. That's our first gaming memory. Their grandparent got us a console, cousin, brother, sister had something. So I think that's really interesting that is like continually a theme that comes up throughout. So thank you for that. So, besides the racing game, and besides the game, so you're a handheld gamer. It seems like that's kind of like your origination, or no, you're not so much.
My first console, the first sort of piece of gaming hardware I owned myself was a PlayStation 1. So it was a home console. It was hooked up to a TV, and it was chipped as everybody's was at the time, so that you could copy games from friends or buy them on the black market, because it was literally everywhere in every single pub in the country. Like you walked in, bought a beer, bought a PlayStation game at the same time, sort of thing. We had a weird setup over here. Don't ask.
I'm like, he was buying a pub and a beer. Like that's such a this is not the United States.
It's such a British thing. Yeah, it's like oh yeah,
pub and a beer,
crisps, PlayStation game. Yeah. That was the way down the bar, sort of thing.
It's like you just did so smoothly. Like it was like here, I was like, what?
So yeah, everybody had a chip PlayStation. We all played all sorts of copied games, but games were also affordable. We'd go and mow someone's grass, for example, get paid £2-3 to do that, and then we could go buy a game from one of the local game stores, either brand new or second hand. So everybody had a different console, and we were all able to play pretty much anything that came out. But it was the handheld that I liked. Like Pokemon on the Game Boy, for example, was a revelation. This whole collecting, fighting your way up to the top. And I mean, it's still a very good thing now, but the games are so much easier than they were back then as well. Like beating the Elite Four in Red and Blue was a big thing. And I remember a friend and I swapping it on a coach ride to France with our scout troop. We got taken to France, went around a couple of like the trench warfare museums and such, and then of course big day at Disneyland, as you do. I mean, if you go into Paris, you do it. And we beat Red on the coach on the way to France. So I was like, well, what do we do now? I've only brought the one game. So we did it again.
Wow.
But it was so tough because you keep switch your team in and out. And it was that ability to game wherever we went that really sold it to me. So I've always had handhelds alongside the home consoles. I've had PlayStation Portables and Vitas. I've had DSs, 3DSs. Mobiles have been a massive revelation in handheld gaming. I've got a Backbone 1 controller right now that I can just hook onto my S22 Ultra, and I can play pretty much anything I want, whether I want it to be AAA games, native mobile games, emulation, retro games. It's opened up a whole different world. So that handheld, the ability to take it anywhere, it sort of paved the way for what my channel ended up being, I suppose, when you look at some of the cloud gaming content over there.
I've seen, and you have a different perspective of cloud gaming. So I think I came originally around your channel. Well, I think we were introduced through Lo-Fi Monk. So shout out to Lo-Fi Monk, right? And he always said, because you look at it from a different perspective, like from an accessibility perspective, like a very, like, as where I look at a lot of stuff from a business, which I think you do too, but you just look at it from a different angle. And so, and we're gonna get back to like your favorite games here in a second, but as far as like when you think about the cloud, and normally I would probably ask this later, but when you think about cloud gaming, what does it represent to you?
At this precise moment in time, and this might be a bit contentious, and I'm sorry, but it represents a failure at the moment.
Okay.
Because we are in a world where we had a cloud console, where Stadia was this thing that acted like a PlayStation under your television or an Xbox under your television. And it gave you access to a platform, games that you could purchase on there, a monthly subscription fee if you so wanted, that came with inclusive titles as well. But they never pushed it forward. They never gave us that full console experience, and then they just shut it down. The problem I've had with everything outside of that is it's either a bring your own service, which feels like a bit of a scam to me, because, oh, you've got to go buy your game somewhere else, then pay us a subscription fee to be able to play it all. And then you might get a good experience, you might not, but you've got to pay us before you can know that with most of them. And all of them are saying, oh, you've got to port forward, you've got to set your frequencies and such. And as you said, I look at it from an accessibility sort of point of view. I look at it from a customer point of view, because that's where most of my working experiences come from. Customer service, front facing, dealing with complaints at corporate level, at individual level, the whole shebang. And if a customer they're going to take the path of least resistance, always. Every customer will. It's why Netflix are struggling at the moment, because they're locking passwords down. And the path of least resistance is suddenly not paying 6 lots of £14 or $28 or whatever the case may be. It's going and pirating the Netflix content and watching it for free, rather than 4 people sharing one of those £14 subscriptions, which was a much easier and more legal process previously. Cloud gaming, moving to these situations where you've got to buy your games on a different platform, but there's no guarantee unless you're looking across 2 different websites simultaneously that they're compatible. And then you've got to set your port forwarding, and you've got to change your network frequency. To the average consumer, that's not going to happen. They don't know how to do that for the most part. And when they've got things like YouTube, Spotify, Kindle and co showing them that they can get access to high quality entertainment with no IT shenaniganery on their part, why should they basically become a company's IT engineer to be able to cloud game themselves when they could just save the hassle, go out, buy a second-hand PlayStation 4 for about £50 and start gaming immediately? So that's why I think cloud is failing at the moment. I think it is a failure at this precise point in time. But on the flip side of it, I do think it's the future of the industry if the providers get their act together. You need to be offering that console experience in the cloud. If you can remove the hardware cost to access, we know already that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo do not make money on the consoles that they sell. Their money is made on their software. So remove the hardware. Give us that software option. Allow us to purchase the games that we want. Give us a subscription option, like most of them do already anyhow, that includes additional content, whether that be a retro option like Nintendo that does run in the cloud already, or whether that be a Game Pass option like Microsoft offer, which again already runs in the cloud. And suddenly you're going to see it take off and be the primary source of everybody's gaming, because you could access it on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, on your television, on your aging Shield TV devices, because they're still around from 2015 for most people. So I want it to be the future. I do think it has a future, but it is very dependent upon these corporations that at this precise moment in time are taking the path of least resistance, easiest making money route, not one that's going to stick around forever.
No, I totally. So I don't disagree. As far as a failure, I think it's too early, which I think, and I think you're saying yours is a working. You're giving an option like right now it's failing, but it could succeed. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, I think when we think about the cloud, I think there is a large incentive to not make it the least resistance, right? I think like if you're an Amazon, for example, you have the incentive to do that. But if and the reason, let me back up for a second, because I think there's quite a bit of studies that would show the biggest indicator of someone using a service, buying software or whatnot, is if they bought hardware already to get right. And so I think when you're dealing with companies that don't work outside of that, right? Amazon, you could do it different. Like Amazon makes perfect. Like they've made their customer service or their thing pretty. They've slicked the wheels. They made it really easy, right, to do that. Google makes it really easy to just go in and watch content. But I think when you think about traditional game, the big powerhouses in gaming, I think that's a scary world, right? That they do that they not make it as much. Even Microsoft, who I think is sabotaging their cloud right now, because it's definitely not running anywhere close to what it was running 12 months ago. But I think we know why they're trying.
No idea why at all. Nothing to do with a certain governing body over here in the UK at all, is it? No.
I think but I really do. I think Cowboys also pointed this one out, but a lot of people would say like, this is not the same. Y'all are pulling something on us. But when you look at it from that perspective, like even they have to attach it to something that was like, right, they're trying to attach it to something that's already generating versus like, let's go off on a limb and not do it. We see PlayStation, right? I think their handheld is supposed to be cloud compatible. I don't know anything about it.
Not from current rumblings. Apparently it's remote play only, which completely off topic. Why? My phone does that.
I don't know. Who knows? We'll talk offline. But and so yeah, I would say I don't think it's a failure because of the technology, right?
Oh no, not at all.
Right, exactly, right. And I think there's a failure there of some of the marketing benefits of it, like the actual marketing and training, teaching consumers. But I also think there is a failure of it because there are entities that don't want to see it succeed just because it destroys their business models. Um, Same with subscription gaming services; it destroys the value proposition to game companies that don't own the subscription service, or actually that still own the subscription service. Yeah, I don't think anybody's figured that one out. So
According to recent documents, it's pure cannibalizing of game sales. It doesn't matter who you are, who's made it.
yeah,
Like, you're losing game sales. You're not making the
unless
same
it's
revenue from the
mobile,
subscription.
unless it's mobile, right? Because we could see our
Very different setup with mobile. Most of the games are free of charge anyhow, but then they're plagued with microtransactions. But because you've not paid to get in, you haven't paid access, you can then justify a £5 fee here and there to maybe boost yourself along or just win that one level. But all of them is when you're then paying to get access, like say with GeForce Now let you through the gate, but then you've got to pay somebody else to ride the roller coaster. It's like going to Alton Towers here in the UK, paying Alton Towers to get in, but then having to pay Asda, a supermarket, to be able to ride the Smiler sort of thing. It's nonsensical to most people.
No. Well, like I said, I know we don't normally talk about stuff. I think there's a reason GFN got their deal. I'll say it like that. I don't think that was just like coincidence. I think that's a very strategic play.
I think there's a very good reason theirs is the only airtight deal as well, considering everybody else has got a get out of jail free card.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, I lost my. Yeah, they do, and they don't actually they have concerns about their deal too. So, so we'll see. All right. So, favorite game.
Oh my days!
Favorite game from your childhood? PlayStation 1. Go.
Spyro the Dragon. 100%.
Spyro. Nice.
Yeah. It was the first sort of AAA experience that I had in my own home. I remember getting the PlayStation at Christmas from my amazing grandparents and aunt and uncle. They'd all come together to sort it out and get a console, few games, and they'd made sure we got 2 controllers as well, so my brother and I could both play. And we spent hours learning how to play Spyro. Like, you go back to it now, and it's a very easy game, but as like an 8 and 6-year-old respectively, we had to learn so much, and it was a bonding thing for the two of us. It became how we played most games. We played them together, even the single player ones. And if one was struggling on one bit, the other one would take over, and so on and so forth. Spyro just has that very special place, and it holds up. Like, even now, they re-released it, made by Toys for Bob on the last generation of consoles, and it holds up. It still plays incredibly well. It's a little easier than I remember, but story-wise and such. Yeah. Oh yeah, but it was just great. And so yeah, that sort of PlayStation 1 era, 100% Spyro the Dragon.
Spyro's super. I think I mean, it's a platformer, some puzzle element. It's kind of like it broke the mold, right? Like,
Yeah. It took the Mario platforming, added a bit of combat to it, and a strong story with full voice acting, which was incredibly rare at that point, especially from the market leader, which was Nintendo. It really did break the mold and just suckered people in.
No, it definitely. I think similar to how Crash did a lot of different things as well during this time frame. Like, I think I kind of put those two like as really breaking the mold and doing things that at the time it was like, what? So no, Spyro's cool. We haven't heard of a Spyro. I haven't heard someone talk about Spyro. So thanks for bringing that one up. And so were you like, obviously you have played with Nintendo, you played it with Sega, but were you at this point like, a PlayStation gamer, or was it didn't really matter at this point?
It didn't matter, mostly because I wasn't deciding on what to buy. So it's get what you're given and like it sort of deal. which, considering the financial situation of my parents and grandparents in the 90s, we'd just come out of Thatcher's Britain here, so the working class were incredibly struggling. So to just get anything that special, that big, was huge. And because friends had got the other consoles, like 8 years old, you don't care. There's no console wars. There's none of this like, oh, you've got to have this one, you've got to have that one. I managed to get this one because everybody got a good deal on it and chipped in together. Friends had the other one, so that meant we could play everything. It was great.
It's interesting. So you bring up something interesting, because everybody says the same thing. Everybody says, like, when we were younger, we didn't think about this console or that. Even like with Nintendo and Sega, like I don't remember arguing. It was like, oh, you have a Sega, like let me go over there, let's play it or whatnot, or you got a Game Gear or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
And obviously you've been around the industry, you've actually seen the backside of the industry as well. And Microsoft just said it was a social construct. This console, where does the console wars come from?
For my money, it came from the point where our generation suddenly started having to buy these things when we weren't the kids anymore, and it wasn't put up and shut up. And suddenly we'd got mega corporations vying for our money. And we didn't have a lot of it. I remember when I first started working, I was working in adventure sports. I was teaching windsurfing and sailing. And as glamorous as that sounds, and as far around the world as it can take you, the pay is shocking. As in, I couldn't survive on it most of the time. I had second and third jobs to make ends meet all around the world, even in those countries that have decent minimum wages like Australia and New Zealand. And when you're then wanting that bit of entertainment, when you've become a gamer because of the consoles that your parents have brought you growing up, what then comes next? Like, I've been lucky enough to have 2 console generations launch whilst parents were willing to buy these things for me. And because we'd had the original PlayStation, they just went out and bought a PlayStation 2 when they could afford it for us. It was just basic, next number up, let's go. Bigger number equals better sort of idea, thought process. And when it came to that next generation, suddenly there was this Xbox 360 on the market. One of my friends at college had the Xbox. Halo had blown me away. We'd never had a first-person shooter like that on console previously, and nothing on PlayStation felt like that at all. We had shooters over on PlayStation, but it didn't feel like Halo, not even slightly. And then suddenly the guys who gave me Halo and this amazing experience were bringing a new console out, but it was really expensive. And then Sony were bringing another one out, a new PlayStation that was even more expensive. As well, vie for my money. Who's better? Who's going to give me the best experience moving forward? And I feel like that was a lot of this generation. Like, we'd gone through PlayStation 1, 2 era, basically having those consoles, and suddenly there was options we had to choose from when we were buying them ourselves. And what you found when you made these companies vie for your money is that they used tribalistic terminologies. Their marketing was all, we're better, you want to come to us, you want to be part of this community, they're not good, they're worse off. And because we were so young, so naive, so untainted by the world at that point, I suppose, you bought into it, and whatever floated your boat better, you took the side of, especially as a guy in that period where the only emotion we were allowed to feel was anger and hatred, but we weren't allowed to feel sorrow or joy or anything else. It was just be angry all the time. We had to be angry about a console somebody else chose. It was what society told us. And again, we were young, we were naive. And because companies saw this taking place and it was free marketing for them as well, they bought into it, all of them. So this whole social construct that Microsoft are talking about, it's kind of a construct that they made.
Or they enabled.
Very much so, yes.
They've enabled. Interesting. No, I see, y'all, this is why I wanted to bring Doragon on. Like, right? He kind of does this thing. He also plays on the other, the not so glamorous side of gaming. And and knows some of these people that you hear in the news as well. Um, that's interesting. So obviously the question that I want to ask next is it possible to end the console war rhetoric?
Yes and no. It's a mindset thing. The companies have sort of given up on it in more recent years because they've realized it was doing more harm to their marketing than good. Like, you look at what Xbox were trying in the last generation. It's the most powerful console. You'll never get power or graphics like this anywhere else. And you can't get this sort of thing on PlayStation. And it just didn't work for them. They lost the generation mostly because they fudged the start of it by giving us a VCR with a game box on top of it. But they were doing all of this versus type language still through their marketing, and people weren't buying into it. Thankfully, they realized probably about halfway through the generation, maybe we need to shift tack here and do something different, be pro-consumer. And that has become more of what all of the companies are doing. It was, I would say personally, probably spearheaded by Microsoft, by Phil Spencer and his team, especially around Game Pass, offering that out to people, giving them access to hundreds of games on multiple different devices for a low monthly cost. It was an amazing industry change. We'd never seen anything like it before, especially with games up at £60 here in the UK back in sort of 2013, 2014. Like, they were very expensive. It's more than a day's work to get a singular game. And some of those games were only lasting 4 hours. So you had to weigh up value for money. And suddenly Phil's like, oh, just pay me a tenner a month and you can play 100 games. It changed the idea. It brought people on board by doing something that they thought was for them. And of course, it's all business. It's all get these subscription fees, get this constant monthly rollover of funds. But when you shape it in that way that it's pro-consumer, and it actually is because the consumer is getting an amazing deal out of it,
Initially.
It forces everybody else to change.
Initially.
Yes.
Subscription model. As we're seeing, you mentioned one before, Netflix. Eventually, there was there's this boom. Everybody wants subscription models. They're giving market multiples of 100 to 200 for Netflix's revenue. And then eventually the chickens come home to roost, and you got to show that type of profitability.
And they're still in profit. I think that's the biggest thing. The Netflix one side of things annoys me the most, that they're still in profit. It's not like they're broke. Oh, we're not making money.
Oh yeah,
they're making hundreds of millions a year. They're a multi-billion dollar company, but they want to be making more. They want to make more than they made last year and more than the year before that. And it's like, you've got to realize at some point that there is a ceiling, there is a plateau, there is market saturation. And I think they have realized that, but they've realized that with their terms and conditions allowing the password sharing for like 10 years at this point, we could make more money if they didn't share with all these people. That's 4 more subscribers.
In theory.
But by the flip side, is it 4 more subscribers? Do you only have that one subscription because those 4 banded together and were able to pay that one subscription fee? And they're seeing a rise in individual subscribers, but a drop in overall subscribers because they're just pricing themselves out and structuring themselves out of the market. And I feel, especially for things like Game Pass, because we heard the moment they hit 20 million 3 years ago, they've not announced another number since. And you would have expected 25, 30, 40, 50 million users that they would have announced that. But they've only ever said 20 million, and that was 3 years ago. So there's got to be a plateau that these services are hitting at some point.
Yeah, I feel that when it comes to with gaming, I think what I've always took issue with and I don't think Microsoft did this, but calling something like the Netflix of gaming. Maybe Microsoft did do that, right? I know that was given to Stadia at one time, and is we consume media differently. Like, like when you think about a TV show, a movie service, like a Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, like we consume that differently than gaming. And if we take it even further, when you look at something like a Spotify, or I'm a big Sirius XM fan, um, YouTube Premium, Amazon Music, whatever it is, we consume that differently. In each of those, you need a certain catalog. I think with gaming, the majority of gamers only play so many games,
Yes.
right? And that is to me where I don't know where that subscription model really, like, there is gamers who play everything, right? And we know, we hear who we see them, many of the people in the community, this is them. They every week they beat in a game and so forth. Most people don't game like that, you know.
Most people can't game like that.
Most
If you
people
think
can't.
about how time poor so many people are, especially here in the UK at the moment, making ends meet on the daily is incredibly tough. This energy crisis is still hitting us. We had bills increase from £50 a month to over £300 a month, and that's on the lowest end of things. Mine went even higher than that. And that's a huge hit to your monthly take-home
Everybody's
pay.
energy bill is going up. Ambi is talking about this. My mom is talking about this. You're talking. This is like a world thing right
Yeah.
now, where energy is just.
And we're in the middle of summer as well, like, especially Northern Hemisphere folks. We're in the middle of summer and our energy bills are this high. I've not got any heating on. I'm not cooking as many hot meals. It's more like half hot, half cold sort of thing. I'm financially poor. I am time poor because I have to work longer hours and harder to make those ends meet. And I'm in a job that pays pretty darn well. And under normal circumstances, it pays pretty darn well. I don't need to worry about these things under normal circumstances, but I am doing. So anybody that little bit lower on the scale than me, they're going to be so much worse off. And suddenly offering 400 games for £14 a month now, because they have upped the price, is suddenly not possible for them. It's a bill that they now have to forego because they can't choose. Sometimes there is such a thing as too much choice, as too big. I mean, how many times have we all sat there trawling through Netflix trying to find something to watch, given up an hour later and just gone to bed?
Well, no, so my brother, I would have to ask my brother. He's I know, I've been playing my phone, chess.com, y'all, chess.com. Mostly. And no, I think you're right. I think there's something that's interesting that's come out of, again, I don't know why this talk is what revolved around ABK Microsoft. Because normally talks don't. Maybe it's because it's during the workday for me.
Maybe.
Maybe that's what it
Maybe
is.
it's because we're waiting for that moment to drop. Come on.
If it drops, it may not drop today. It may not drop. I feel like they would have dropped it already. But there is something that came out about it, which is like what's happening in Hollywood right now, right? On the silver screen, right? And I don't think we've talked about this. I meant to talk about this before on my when I talked to the community, but there's a writer's strike. There's basically a creatives strike in Hollywood right now. And a lot of the different guilds, the writers guilds, the animation guilds, they're all joining forces and creating in a strike. And I don't think a lot of people, these have happened a couple of times over the last several decades, but this one is at a really interesting breaking point because not only is it contract negotiations, but you now have AI, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of coming at both of them. And to your point about like so many options on Netflix, so many options on any subscription service, but it's like, what do I want to watch? Well, you have your like great TV shows, like, for me, House of Cards, right?
Yeah.
I really like.
Great choice.
Yeah, when Netflix first came out, really put it on the map. Amazon Prime had a few, Hulu had a few, right? You had these like really solid content that you watched all there, and then you sat around and maybe caught up on some old shows or something. But you had like that tent pole of a show.
Yes. Yeah.
But now it's like, how many of those shows exist? right? You see so many shows that have come out that are it's like, if you just had not if you did not put out these 3 shows and just made one really good show, that would have been great. But you gave me like 3 not so great shows. Like
Yeah.
whether it's the acting, whether it's the writing, whether it's the whatever. And so I don't know. I think that's kind of like come out a little bit in this trial when they talked about subscription services. Again, I think subscription services are great for some, not
Yes.
so much
Yes.
for others. And it's interesting. But what do you think of that? What do you think? Like, and we talked about behind this. So let me put you on the spot here.
Okay.
What do you think of the ABK Microsoft deal?
Oh, my thoughts have changed quite drastically since it was first announced. In was it January or February 2022 when they announced it?
End of January 2022.
Yeah, January 2022. My initial thought was, oh, thank God, because we were in the midst of all of these revelations about the abuse of the company.
ABK.
And Microsoft have to adhere to EU regulations because they operate here most of the time. And we have incredibly strict rules, regulations, policies, and processes that companies need to adhere to, especially around things like abuse. But ABK doesn't operate here. They operate in the sketchy areas in between that aren't part of the European Union. They're on like European land, but not part of the European Union. And so I know secondhand the abuse that they offer. I have a friend's wife who left 10 years ago from working at Blizzard and has only just got to the point of being able to sit in a room with 3 additional people through therapy. That's the level of abuse that she received. So I know secondhand how bad it can be. And hearing that takeover, my only thought was for the staff, was for the people. Like, this is a good thing. Like, if they get taken over by Microsoft operate within the EU.
They have laws. They have rules.
They have laws and the rules that have to be followed. This is going to be amazing for the staff. And I do honestly still hold by that thought process. If nothing else good comes from it, there's that. People will be protected by Microsoft taking over. So I think we have to hold that above everything else. We have to hold that in that pure viewpoint, because it's still an issue that they are experiencing. It is an issue that Blizzard have spoken about in the past 2 months, especially with how things like Overwatch and Diablo 4 launches have gone. But from a gamer's perspective, from an individual's perspective, as more time has passed and I've looked at it more and taken in more of what's been said and how people have acted and reacted to certain things, I really don't want it to go through. And most of that comes from, I know they're lying. I know they're going to make things exclusive to Xbox that have been multi-platform across everywhere previously. But more importantly, for me as an end user, I need and want competition in the industry. Competition drives innovation, it drives quality. And if all we're doing is allowing the 3 big players to gobble up all of the third-party publishers, because let's not forget, it's not just one development house that they're trying to buy here. It's the publishing house of Activision Blizzard, which brings them about 30 different development houses from all different shapes and sizes and expertise. And if they disappear off the open market, that's suddenly 30 less individual developers not tied down to a certain platform and thought process that have just gone. And I want that competition in the marketplace. So yeah, very, very 2 minds about it. From an insider view of it, go ahead, get it done, get those staff protected. From a customer perspective, please block it at every turn.
Interesting. No, I think for me, I told you I look at it from the deal. It's a weird from a mergers acquisition perspective. It's very weird to me, and so that's why I'm always like, this isn't how this works. Like,
Yeah.
Not from a regulation. Like, I understand why they're doing. Like, hats off to both the ABK and Microsoft teams. They are doing what they get paid to do. So I know exactly what they're capable of, and they're doing that. But from a former consultant in a prior life, um, you don't put together mergers in like a month. Like you just don't. Like
No,
you
you don't.
don't like, and that's where I'm just like, how did this doesn't? There's a lot of issues that are revolving, and we're starting to see it, right? Um, so I think from my perspective, it's just like this is interesting because it's very haphazard. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's always nice to see people make a mess of things that you're not
yeah,
involved with,
it's
isn't
very haphazard.
it?
It's very haphazard, and then when you see like what's going on currently at Microsoft, friends at Microsoft, and you start to see now. Granted, they get eh, at a certain point you get paid pretty well, right? So this is first world problems, but Microsoft is about to go through their second year of no pay raises. Um, as like a blanket, it's a blanket policy. The first year was like okay, but now you're going through a second year that they were just announced, and now you're seeing like we're spending XYZ on that. Like as an employee, a lot of times you're like, well, what about the people here? So
I can imagine them looking at the 10,000 layoffs earlier in the year as well
yeah,
with a very questionable eye because there's 10,000 employees of Activision Blizzard.
yeah,
So are they literally just making space for them, clearing out my desk to bring this new guy in? I can understand
so
people
I
being disgruntled.
Yeah, so I see it from that from the Bobby Kotick situation. I knew one of their former heads of HR there, and he's no longer there. Um, and yeah, was hearing quite how bad. Like I've said, I've talked to Bobby one time. I don't know him, but he's a very arrogant guy.
Yeah,
Um, and so like I definitely hear that, and to me though, I think there's other ways you can remove someone, and that's kind of where I would rather it see done, um rather what I would have liked to see done
yeah.
versus like what potentially could happen. I think we talked about golden parachute, we talked about a bonus. I continue to say like he already has most of what y'all are saying he's going to get as a golden parachute. Like he already has it's not like
Yeah, it's just it'll be cashed out, bought out.
yeah,
That's where
yeah,
this whole golden parachute is coming from. He owns the shares. He has that money available to him
yeah,
at any point. It's just a case of he's holding on to it because
yeah,
when the deal goes through, he gets more than what he gets if he sells them now.
yeah. And but like when I think of like Google, if you think of remember the walkout there, that guy actually got 150 million to leave.
Yeah,
That's kind of where I separate the two. Is like you just paid the sexual, like the actual sexual harasser, where Kodak turned a blind eye. This dude, and so, but yeah, I don't know. But with that said, we're gonna switch over to cosplay.
okay,
You know.
okay. That was oh, wow, yeah. Let me just check. I've not got whiplash there. That was a 180.
Yeah, no, I feel like the ABK deal has brought out a lot of like political energy, like what you
It's going to,
normally,
yeah.
yeah, where you and then when you look at like uh socioeconomic theories, like whether you're looking at a kinesiology or Friedman or what, like you start looking like it starts becoming very political, and like the role of regulators and the role of like, and so like it quit, like I've seen it take that discourse,
Yes, yeah.
and it's kind of, and I don't think people mean to do that, right? But I think like they're so passionate about it, and for me it's like, oh, this is too
It's where the information leads you as well, unfortunately, because of what the situation is. And yeah, it can get very uncomfortable. It can make you
yeah,
squirm a bit because it makes you realize things about people that maybe you didn't previously. And you start
right.
questioning a bit of everything, which you wouldn't do under any other circumstance.
Because we're gamers. We want to have fun. As Simpleton always says, gaming is meant, we're supposed to, games are fun. And
Maybe not the Dark Souls, but yeah, yeah.
no, I think so. People who like Souls games, they like a certain type of experience. Like, you know what I mean?
Hey, what they get up to in the bedroom is up to them.
That's what I'm just saying. Like they like a certain type of experience. Like that's all I'm saying. Like I had this conversation with Cowboy. People who like that, like who am I to say? If you enjoy that, if you have safe words and whatnot, like then that's you. Like, you know.
My safe word is Xbox off.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Oh, yeah. Okay, if you haven't watched this show before, there will be tangents.
There's a so that's what I said. With that said, we're getting into cosplay.
Oh my
This
days.
is why he's Doragon.
Oh god. Right, cosplay, yeah, hit me.
So your cosplay, you know, we were talking a little before the show, and cosplay is kind of a manifestation of prior work in your life, right? So a lot of times we talk to people on the show and we find out like amazing things that we did not know. And for our audience, you're kind of famous. Not just for Doragon, but for like we talk about the silver screen earlier with Hollywood. You know a thing or two about that, right?
I've been on a couple of film and TV sets here and there. I've had speaking lines and full credits and such. You know, nothing major.
Oh my gosh! So anything that we know. So if y'all did not know that, Doragon he's like it's like an actor.
At the age of 8, I took to the stage. It was a local stage just near me. It was something done through scouting. Scouting gave me a lot of opportunities in life. And whilst looking at it now as an adult, I do realize some of the problems that it has. The opportunities it gave me specifically and what I got out of it, I will always praise. But you've always got to look at things with both eyes, sort of thing. So at the age of 8, I did this sketch show. Funny little skits here and there. And I didn't expect much to come of it. I expected essentially the chorus role, which is where you're one of the backing vocalists and you just sing the main harmony and dance along to the choreography. But pretty quickly, I started getting put into bigger and bigger roles until I got the role of Little John in a Robin Hood sketch, which was actually the lead role of the sketch. Robin was only in it for like 3 minutes, and he was a useless cadwaller, as one of my lines was. So, yeah, Little John was the lead role in this particular sketch. And as this 8-year-old kid, I walked on with what was essentially a quarter staff, but, you know, I was only like 4 foot something at the time. So it was to scale. And I got to beat a bunch of adults off stage, got the biggest laugh out of the audience every single night. And it gave me this bug of wanting to perform. So I evolved. I went into more shows, did a couple more sketch type shows, went into competition plays. So they did like these 1-act plays where you play a character, you go up against somebody else. So first act is one company that's putting this show together. The second act is another company. And whomever the audience like most goes on to the next round. Never quite made the finals, made the semis 3-4 years running. I did pantomimes in all sorts of different roles. A big sword fight on stage where we were hitting each other so hard with the swords, both of them broke, which, you know, on a Wednesday night isn't great because it runs till Saturday. And it's evolved from there. Eventually, I moved out to New Zealand. That was as part of my job teaching windsurfing and sailing that took me out there because, you know, it's very seasonal, that sort of thing. People want to do it in the summer. They don't want to be breaking the ice with the windsurfer and falling in the water at that sort of time of year. So you follow the sun a little bit in those sort of jobs.
Did you ever run into a shark?
Oh, yeah, loads.
Like great whites? Like you?
Yeah, there was a great white that got stranded on Manly Beach where I was living. We've got like a seawater pool. So when the tide goes out, you can swim in this quite safely with no tidal flow. But the great white, little baby one, wasn't a full-size one. Wow. It got trapped in there. So me and 6 other people picked it up, ran it down all the stairs, got it into the water, and off it went. It had hopefully a nice long life after that. But yeah, you never have to worry about the sharks. As long as you're not bleeding or something, they're not going to attack you. you don't look like the food that they want, and you taste pretty bad to them as well. So even if they do get hold of you, they're letting go pretty quick.
Well, Doragon, on this show, we do talk about orcas. So on this channel,
Yes. I have come across this a couple of times in the past. Yes.
Orcas are well, we're not going to do that. My mom thinks I pick on the orcas too much. So I'm just going to say, Mom, obviously there you heard it. Like we're being friendly to great whites today. Okay?
Yeah.
We're not going to call, I can't call them killer whales anymore. My mom's like, they're not killer whales. And I was like,
well, no, they're not a whale. So technically she's very correct.
Yeah. But that's what they're called. But fine. It's what my mom and I discussed. She's like, the poor little animals. I'm like, they're not that little, Mom. But
they are quite large. I mean, I'll give them that much. They're not little.
They're not little, and they know how to dismantle boats. But we're not going there. We're not going. So here we talked about a great white, Mom. Look at that. Doragon did a good job. And now you don't see any great white killing people because this one has told all the other great whites not to kill people.
I hope so. Yeah.
That's how it works.
But yeah, so whilst out there, as I was saying earlier, back on track, tangents. So whilst out there, as I was saying earlier, like teaching windsurfing and sailing, it didn't really pay every single bill. It didn't give you a huge amount of cash. It was hugely rewarding in an individual basis, but you needed a bit more. And especially in the lower seasons, like your springs, your autumns, work was a lot slower. You were only in at the weekend, so you had plenty of time to go and search for something else. And acting came up as an option. It started off as extras in shows, and I jumped at it because something I could do, something I was good at. And first time, they just gave me a lab coat and a clipboard and said, walk across the back of the screen whilst they're saying this line. Dead easy, $250 for the day's work. I'll take that. Yep, that's great. And it started to grow from there. I ended up in a battle scene in Power Rangers. I was in about 6 episodes of Power Rangers RPM.
What were you in Power Rangers?
I was a city guard in Power Rangers. So I started off with the general. Most of the scenes that the general's in early on in the season, I'm in those scenes with him. And then I get killed off in a big battle with the big bad out in the wastelands. So I had a big space gun, I had a cool helmet, jumpsuit, whole shebang. I felt like I was in Stargate SG-1 or something.
And then they killed you off, like.
And then it's part of the role. There's got to be some jeopardy.
So Power Rangers is pretty cool. So
it's one of the bigger claims to fame. But then I was also in things like Legend of the Seeker, Shortland Street. Shortland Street was my credited role. I had a speaking role as a camera person for events. So any event that they did in this soap opera, I was the camera guy there. And the first one I did was incredibly awkward because I was actually filming part of the show as well. So I wasn't just acting, I was filming. You were
actually filming.
Actually filming like shots that were used in the show. Very weird experience, having never operated a big camera recorder before, especially not like of the professional quality that you get on these shows. And the shot that I had to get was of people walking through the door for the event. They're like, right, when this actress walks in, we need you to pan up and stop on her chest. And I was like, okay, so it's a Lecce camera. Yeah, no problem. I hadn't seen what she was wearing, and I got to the chest after the pan up, just looking through the viewfinder, and dropped the camera because there was not a lot left to the imagination.
Oh no! But they knew that.
I was so shocked. They knew that. They thought I'd seen it. I hadn't. And that shot actually ended up getting left in because it was so much funnier and better than what they had initially planned. So I got called back for 3 or 4 on those, and I would have been back for a 5th, but I had to leave the country at that point due to visa situations. And because there were other people who could do that role within New Zealand, they couldn't justify getting me a working visa for it.
Okay.
Had it been a bigger role, maybe, but with the role that it was, they could get a Kiwi to do it. So the visa extension wasn't granted. So yeah, I've been in quite a few things, a couple of Disney movies.
What Disney movies?
Skyrunners is the big one. Like, they were both straight to Disney XD. Skyrunners is the one I can remember the name of. I can't quite remember the other one. And then a bunch of adverts as well. Adverts pay so well. Like, they were
So what's an
$500 a
advert?
day.
What's an advert for people who don't
So
know?
television advertisement. You guys have like infomercials and such between your shows. When our shows go to a break over here, we get incredibly smart advertisements that tell a story or are just funny. Like, we had one for a milkshake, and the milkshake's tagline was thick milk. And so it was a pantomime horse / cow that fell down wells or ran into walls, knocked itself out regularly, that sort of thing. When it did this stupid thing, it was then just shouted thick milk over the top, and you knew which milkshake that was. We've got jingles for crunchy bars. We've got jingles for Cocoa Pops and all this sort of stuff. Like, our adverts over here, like, seeing them anywhere else in the world, like Australia and New Zealand adverts, suck. They are awful. Having seen some of your infomercials recently, I was like, I feel for you guys. Our advert breaks are fun. They're entertaining. They're as good as the show itself.
I have to see this. Hold secure in chat. Let us know. I think there's a couple of people who come from the UK who stay up a little bit. Uncompetitive, I think he's also a UKer. There's a couple of people. Obviously Rock if he comes by. So I'll have to go YouTube some UK advertisements.
Yeah, you won't regret it. They're good.
What is
like,
it? Thick
some of them,
milk? Thick milk? I'm gonna look.
thick milk. Yeah, that one was fun. The trio bars, like, they were a 90s advert, but people still sing them to this day. They sing them at sports events, just walking down the street, in the pub. Like, these adverts, they get stuck in the entire zeitgeist of the society. Like, they become part of our society. They are that good.
No wonder UK view it. Y'all have like this interesting humor, and it's because it's comes from your commercials. Like, it's
Pretty
like
much, yeah.
it's like this inside joke that no one like.
No one outside of this tiny little island knows.
Y'all are talking about it. Y'all are like, it's like, what?
Just wetting ourselves laughing all the way home. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
That's super cool. I've been to the UK, but I can't remember. Like when you go travel, you're not watching.
You don't watch the TV.
Yeah,
no,
you're not watching the TV.
You're doing the cultural stuff. You're visiting nice places. You go into things that have historical value or are part of the local culture. Yeah, you're not sitting watching the television.
Because you don't know what the television channels are. You don't know like channel. When I was in France, well, I studied in France, so it was a little. You kind of get used to those, but that's because it was like homework.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in Australia, they've got a channel called Channel 9 that was always on 5. Where is the sense here?
Oh my god, it's like no, I guess here it does depend on like where you're at. They usually will say like ABC 15 or ABC 20, and I was trying to think, but then I realized like, oh no, they actually make sense here. So
yeah, that one really didn't.
No, channel 9, channel 6. No, that's super cool. So you did that. So and so in Cowboy, if he's watching, he asked me to ask you this. So you wear skirts, obviously, in Cowboy once and so did this come with acting, or like how did you get into skirt wearing? Which I think is totally fine. I was like, Cowboy, if you like skirts, he likes skirts. So
I don't actually wear skirts. I'm sorry to say I've never worn one. I was never a pantomime dame, so I didn't get to dress up in full panto dame costume. I was never the leading lady, because the leading lady in a panto is always a man, and the leading man is always a lady, and so on and so forth. Like, everything's always switched in pantos. I never got to it there. I think the closest I've ever got is certain types of character. So like Little John, for example, he wears his big robes. Like, everybody knows what they look like from different Robin Hood things over the years. And the one that would probably come closest to that is Men in Tights, the very comedic Robin Hood movie.
yes,
That was what that costume was based upon. So kind of a skirt, kind of a tunic. It was a very period piece. But the one that Cowboy is referring to specifically is a character from an anime called One Piece, and he is the first mate of the crew called Roronoa Zoro. He is the swordsman, so he holds one sword in each hand and another one in his mouth, and he wears kimonos. And the videos and images that Cowboy has seen where he's on about the skirts is me wearing these kimonos with trousers underneath, I may add, and giant pirate boots with swords everywhere. So I've never actually worn a skirt, and it's something I would maybe want to do at some point. I've got nothing against it. There's people out there that I know that do full cross cosplay. So I've got male friends who only dress as women in cosplay, and the process is phenomenal, especially what they learn about skincare, makeup, and that sort of thing. Like, we've all taken the skincare on because you all wear makeup for cosplay because it makes you look better. It makes you look more like the character. You can change the contours of your nose, your cheeks and such to look more like this character that you're trying to embody now and then. But yeah, I'm sorry, Cowboy. I've never worn a skirt. It's always been kimonos or tunics or trench coats.
It's so serious to explain because Cowboy was like, "You have to ask him this." I was like, "No, it's not a real. It's not."
If he wants it answered, I'll give him a big answer. I'll give him a proper answer.
There it goes. There you go, Cowboy. It was not a skirt. It was a kimono. But given the chance, he would wear a skirt just because he thinks it would be part of the role or part of the cosplay. So yeah, there it goes. I really want to see your site if you don't mind. Like, I really want to, not for this, but it seems like you're actually really good at cosplay. You obviously have
Sometimes.
fans. You have fans. Well, you have fans, right? So like, have you ever competed?
I've competed once. Well, I've been successfully competing once. I've done. Most conventions have a competition on, but it is basically a catwalk. So you walk down the catwalk, walk up the catwalk, and if people like the costume, you get a cheer. If the judges like the costume, you get a prize. That prize is generally like a voucher for one of the stalls at the convention. So they're cool, they're fine. But the big competition, and it took 6 months to complete, was in 2019. I submitted my Zorro costume, so the one that Cowboy thinks is a skirt, for a worldwide competition. It was for the 20th anniversary of the One Piece anime, and they wanted to have this big Grand Prix for One Piece cosplayers worldwide to celebrate. And it was such a rare thing because the IP is so well protected by the publisher Kodansha that usually you don't get that opportunity to compete solely as One Piece up against other One Piece competitions with official branding and everything next to it. And loads of people entered. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people worldwide entered. And I got an email one day stating I'd made it to the second phase, which I was ecstatic about. Like, I didn't expect to make it past the first phase, let alone any further. But in that email, they said, make sure you've got these dates off from work so that you could come out to Japan, all expenses paid, if you make it through to the third round, because that'll be the finals. And 3 weeks later, I got a Zoom call from a lovely Portuguese man who was one of the translators for the World Cosplay Summit to say, congratulations, you're the best Zorro in the world, and you are coming out to Japan in August. I nearly wet myself. I definitely cried. Huge tears of joy. And then I started bricking it because I had never competed in any way, shape, or form. And everybody else were people with like 10, 12, 14,000 followers on Instagram alone. And there was me with my lowly 120. And I was terrified because these were all really professional level cosplayers that they got paid to do it.
Professional. Like, what are you talking about?
They got paid to do it and taken out all over the world. I got there and they started talking about all of these previous competitions, and I was like, yeah, this is my first. And thankfully, all of their jaws hit the floor like, how is this only your first? You're amazing. What the hell?
Yeah.
because we'd all look through everybody's like profiles and such prior to going out. And I've got some lifelong friends from it that spread all over the world. One of them in
That's
France.
so cool. That's so
But yeah,
cool.
to be on stage competing as Zorro, being told you are the best Zorro in the world for your costume, there's no feeling like that. Not when you've put the effort into making that costume, to having it so accurate down to things like the curse marks on the swords and the tempered metal marks on the swords. Even things like the earrings being custom made so that they fit on. I don't have ear piercings, but he wears 3 earrings down his left ear, and having them individually made so that I could place them at the right levels up his ear, and having people recognize that and take me out to Japan, show me around Tokyo, put me on a bullet train to Nagoya, like learning that Nagoya is essentially 2 cities in one. You've got the above ground city and the below ground city, which is fantastic. Getting days completely free to just explore these places, and then out in front of like 2,000 people on stage screaming and cheering for this character that you're embodying, and 3 million people on YouTube at the exact same time. It's an experience that I probably won't have again, because I haven't done too much cosplay since that point. Again, this minor thing happened that ended the world and what have you, and things are only just starting to get back to normal. And I've sort of fallen out of the rhythm of it. So it may happen again, but if it doesn't, it's such an amazing memory.
That's super awesome. And I just want to say congrats. I think that's super cool. For one, not only for you to win and just be kind of like this like phenom in cosplay, but also to just share that. I don't like I know a little bit about cosplay, but not seriously. And so just to kind of understand that world a little bit more. So thank you for that, Doragon.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover from gaming to cosplay. I mean, there's no point in history that you haven't looked at a character and thought, they look really cool, I want to dress like them, or I really like that weapon they've got, I'd like to have one of those. Most people have had those sorts of thoughts. The thing with cosplay is you just realize those thoughts safely. Like the swords aren't sharp or anything, and the guns don't fire, but you're just realizing those thoughts that we've all had as kids and living out a fantasy, and it's just great fun. And the creation process, that's the bit I love. Like,
I'm not creative
learning materials, putting them together. It's great.
I'm not creative like that whatsoever. So hats off to everyone who definitely is can do stuff like that. So no, super cool. Super cool. Well, Dorgan, I know you're I stole you for your pretty busy day. But we talked about gaming. We got super political at Microsoft Activision. We talked about sharks in New Zealand, cosplay, acting. I mean, what did we not hit something?
Probably. I've been a very active fellow in my life. There's stuff that I forget that I've done, and then people will tell me about it. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, that happened. So probably, but that just means there's got to be another occasion, doesn't there?
So we got to do another one. No, and thank you again for talking about. We hear about cloud gaming so much from like the player perspective, and sometimes I'll talk about the business side of it. You talked about it from a business player perspective that we haven't seen as well. So that was super cool to hear and get your thoughts. I know a lot of people were looking forward to me sitting down with you and talking to you, but it looks like we got to do another one.
It looks like it, yeah. Get the questions in. Let her know what she should ask. Weird, wonderful, probing, non-probing. I'll tell. Hang on, be careful where I say that one.
And I am gonna Future Purple. Make sure his link is in the down below. Doragon, you're super close to affiliate 1,000 subscriber affiliate because we now have.
I am getting closer. Once that rollout comes through, the one where they lowered everything for like the fan funding, I'm already at that point.
Yeah, you're at that one.
It's rolled out to my private accounts, just not my Doragon account.
Oh, the one that you really need made it.
Yeah, so waiting on that one, but I'm at 863 subscribers currently.
And then
So
that's where you get, and just for
at the
everybody who doesn't,
1,000, it's the advert revenue.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So for everybody at 500 subscribers and 3,000 watch hours, YouTube now you can do super chats and memberships, like that type of stuff. And at the 1,000, but to get the ad revenue, you still need to be at the original 4,000 watch hours and 1,000
yeah.
subscribers. So yeah, so they still have that type of tiered system.
I think it's
Um,
a really good system, to be fair. It brings them more in line with what competitors like Twitch and Kick are doing. It's still harder to achieve than those two, but I also think that's probably a good thing because you've got more loyal viewers and fans at that point. So fan funding at 500 subs seems like a very sensible move to me.
yeah, I think it's something much more because for one, like to still get to 500 is still like a multi-year journey.
Oh yeah,
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 like yeah, and so, but it is like a stepping stone, as we're like 1,000, you could face like that burn off, and some people hit like their peak right around like 500 to 600, and then they go, like they lose some of their followers and some people, so it allows them to at least um get to that. So I don't know, but I also understand people are like, I had it like back in my day, like I understand that too. So
Well, back when I started the channel, if I'd had anything relating to YouTube knowledge back then, I could have monetized it the moment I set it up. This channel was made in 2009, and you didn't need any prerequisites to monetize your
yeah.
content back then. But I had no idea you could monetize YouTube. Who knew that?
You could have had millions of subscribers.
I could have been huge by
Yeah,
now, but no, it was 2017 where I realized this was a thing. So it's like, yeah, I may have missed the boat on that one.
yeah, that's all right. But now you have the knowledge for the next endeavor, whatever. Which in this one
Indeed.
still, and this one still. Well, Durgan, any last words? Floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Like, thank you for doing this show regularly. I can never catch it live just because it's on at 1 a.m. here. So I'm asleep. I'm an old man. I'm asleep at that point. But I do watch it during work. It keeps me sane a lot of the time. I love what you do here. Thank you for having me on, for reaching out and asking me to be on. I feel incredibly honored with that. And everybody who keeps tuning in to watch it, thank you for keeping Purple going.
Oh no! Well, thank you. It's about the community. It's not about me. It's about the community. I think this one I
Totally
kind of
about you.
no, no. It's not. I think I talked probably the most on this one. Probably Cammy's as well. I talked a lot on hers as well. So I try not to. It's definitely about yours. And everybody, please, Doragon, like he's links down below. He does his own playthroughs, and he also does his own videos. And like I said, there's not too many people in our community that have that, not only passion for gaming, but also kind of sneak behind the curtain in how some of these companies work and some of the thought process. And so he definitely has a very well earned, educated opinion on a lot of things. So thank you for sharing that, Doragon. And for everyone else, it's about that time where I say, I don't care where you game, how you game, why you game, when you game, what you game on, how long you've been gaming. As long as you're gaming, you're good with me. And as always, this is Purple Haze, and the proof is in the playing. All right, take care, everyone.